Hello and welcome to this TECHNIA webinar broadcast. It's one webinar in a series of webinars that TECHNIA will be doing during this spring and beginning of summer. Today's topic is how to maximize cross-device user acceptance of your PLM system using TVC in Helium Mode. My name is Peter Skogsberg and I'm one of the product owners of the TECHNIA Value Components software suite. So let's get started. Something about the webinar outline and content, what we plan to do today. So we will begin with a short background of what are the TECHNIA Value Components, what type of software is that and how does it position within the 3D experience stack. We will go into some generics around user acceptance as a concept and drivers of that. Continuing on somewhat generic level, we will have a look at the state of modern user interfaces and user experiences, how they have standardized during the last 2 years, and some examples on the results and outcome of that. We will also then start to look into what that means in terms of user expectations, both in their personal lives when they are using consumer software, but also in their professional role at work when they work with enterprise software. What types of expectations does users have today? We will look into how we can enable the platform for more users and for also more usages by keeping these user acceptance drivers in mind and in working with UI and UX. Then we will take an outward look from TECHNIA perspective. We will look into the 3D experience enterprise stack and their UI directions and where they are going and how we at TECHNIA are adopting to that and positioning to that. We will look into what dashboard and widget-based layouts are and what it means that we are using them, some benefits with that and outcomes. We will look into themes, UI themes for an application, and also branding, how to apply corporate branding and styling for end users. We will have a quick look at an example gallery on different UI inspirations, how things can look and how you can style things. Then we will come into a section with a demo scenario, which is intended to show the PLM UI also across different device types, so both a PC and desktop usage, but also on a mobile phone, and how that can be tied together into a working actual work process. Then finally some outlook on what do we think is the future and next steps in terms of driving higher user acceptance for your end users, but also UI and UX wise. And just to establish the concept of what the TECHNIA value components are, so those are the family name of the TECHNIA UI components that live inside and alongside 3D experience. So we see this as both the classic TVC components and also the Helium Mode of those, and they can be used either inside 3D space as they have been traditionally. It can be used in a standalone UI, which we will see in our videos and demos today, and they can also be used inside of Dassault System 3D dashboard. So that is something just around what do we mean with the value components and where do you use them. on a vertical axis, we may say that we build on top of the Innovia system with our TVCs, and these are the configurable UI layers that your actual end users are seeing in their web browsers. And Helium Mode is in turn on top of the TVCs. So those are the value components. Some of the reasons why we at TECHNIA in the software team are making these value components is to increase and improve the user acceptance rates. So how happy are the end users in the system? So 4 of these drivers we will go a little bit more into today, in terms of how we can improve the user experience, how we can raise user acceptance by making it available across devices, simplification and intuitiveness, so ease of use is another factor for how quickly a user accepts a system, and then of course performance as well, so it has to be loading quickly, and also it has to be designed so that the user does not have to do too many clicks and navigational steps, so performance in terms of efficiency. So what does it mean then to have an efficient UI and having a good user experience? I think in a good modern UI it's all about achieving navigational flow, and you can do that maybe in the best way by being familiar in that type of UI and how to interact with it. So consumers and software users are used to a certain user interface. So on the top left of any web application, for example, you probably expect a top bar to be present, and in the left corner of that a logo type for the application, and clicking that takes you to the start page. You always have this inline search box, so that is constantly within reach regardless of how you navigate in the platform. This top bar remains fixed even if you scroll down the page, so you have some assumptions about how this will work. If you are looking at users of a web application or any application, this is typically how a user is represented today, with a rounded profile image and maybe some icon indicating something contextual of these users, for example their availability or online status, or whether they have completed a certain task or registered for some event or something like that. And you typically accompany this image with 1 or maximum 2 text labels explaining something about those users. On the top right corner you tend to expect something regarding your personal preferences of this application, maybe your account or profile page, or your preferences for notifications, or just when you want to change your personal details or anything like that. You expect that to be in the top right corner typically. And in the bottom right corner you might expect to have containers that can expand in size and be docked, such as email drafts and chat boxes and other types of notifications that you may want to expand onto full screen, but then also you may want to minimize when you're looking at some other UI on this same page. If you have a list view, you will probably expect it on a touchscreen device to be swipeable for deleting it or archiving it or something like that. And if you are on a mobile device and you get notified about something that requires your attention, you tend to expect some vibration and haptic feedback that asks for your immediate attention. So not only UI wise, but also using the hardware and the features of the device to illustrate the urgency of the notification. So all of this is familiar from the industry leaders in the IT and software industry. So this is a screenshot of the Apple latest iOS version. Here we have the Spotify music Android application showing the song genres, and here is one of the pages on Facebook on PC when you are looking to find events in your vicinity based on some time period. So Apple, Spotify and Facebook have pretty similar grid or widget based ideas here when they are listing different objects by categories. And this is of course all consumer software. So these things and these softwares, they tend to look more and more alike in the last few years, or maybe decade we can extend to, because of standardization. Components in a user interface have been somewhat standardized. I think it may have been driven by web frameworks like Bootstrap and Foundation and Material UI and the flat design trend and various design concepts and frameworks that have been heavily used on web applications. So things tend to look something like this nowadays, and it's not only for mobile devices but also on desktop, and it's not only for web applications, but it's also beginning to look more in this direction even on installed native software. So thanks to these standardizing UI components, users can be more efficient in their UI navigation. That's my theory. So it's maybe a little bit boring to see standardization to this degree, but probably also efficient. However, this is software and apps and the user interfaces that users encounter on their personal time. So enterprise software does not necessarily look like that, or at least it hasn't traditionally. So these are obviously extremely old examples of native Windows-based software, but the idea here is to indicate that enterprise software often requires more data to be displayed at any given time in the UI. It also has a lot more features and functionalities typically that the user can use and leverage, but that also of course adds a little bit of added complexity. So how do I find the features and functions that I want, which ones are necessary and useful for me, which ones are irrelevant? So there is obviously a UI gap there, that even if you're an end user of enterprise software, you have come to now expect the UI level of consumer software. So if we introduce a little bit of an analogy here, if you are a power user, like a trained pilot of this B-52 navigator cockpit, then you have a lot of needs and you want all of the powerful complexity, even though it comes with a cost. So this cost is the need for training, which takes time and effort to train a user in a powerful and complex system. And you need some experience with this complex system before you are fully self-sufficient in it. So first you need some training, and then you need some usage time in the system itself before you are a fully efficient user in this complex system. So what we think is a good door opener for increasing platform accessibility is to enable more users to come into the system with a simplified approach. So here we have a guy who, let's say that this guy is not a trained pilot, he just wants to find something on the map, and instead of having to learn how to use the radar and all of the complex features of this instrument panel, he might simply reach out to his pocket, open his phone, and use a maps application. So in this case, maybe this was the right UI for his task or role. If he's not there to be a pilot, he's just there to find some navigation assistance. And using this role-based or task-based UI, we think also allows for the user to give them focus on what they're doing instead of having to find their way through a distracting user interface. Simplification can provide focus, is our theory here, and that in turn will minimize the amount of training if everything is streamlined to the degree where they can navigate on the first try. Why this is good is maybe in place to talk about as well. So if you have your PLM system, then you have one group over here along the complexity axis, which is the power users that are the equivalent of the fully trained pilots of the first image. They need all the features, they need all the functionalities, they are experienced, and they want to keep this UI. No questions around that. It's a powerful user interface and you can do everything from there. However, on the other end of the scale, you may have these casual users that you want to come into the system, you want them to produce data in the system or consume data in the system, and for them we think having a more streamlined UI, maybe thinking a little bit along the app philosophy, that I want an app to do some specific task, or an app that is tailored around a certain role in the organization. So doing that is something that we think is a way for the long tail user base to start interacting with the PLM application. Consume data, produce data, but more importantly is don't work in an isolated island outside of the system with Excel sheets or anything like that. We should start opening this door. If we come back now to these software and IT industry leaders that we spoke about, Apple, Spotify, and Facebook in this example, these consumer software and their apps have a really high user acceptance, obviously, as billions of people use these services voluntarily and in some cases are also paying to do that. If we put this in contrast to enterprise software, it's not something that an end user is personally paying for directly, at least, but the perception may sometimes be in the more negative scale, that they have to use the software and it doesn't matter how the UI looks and so on. So there may be a user acceptance barrier between different types of software, something that you choose to use on your personal time and something that you have to use for your work purposes. So we believe that there is a way to bring down this user acceptance wall by applying familiar UI and streamlining it as well. So in essence, if we come to the point where users can use a familiar looking UI which is tailored to their role in the system or their current needs in form of a more app-like UI, we think that even enterprise software can feel familiar and streamlined in a similar way. And hopefully we can come to the point where we are getting users' acceptance to the level of that this isn't too bad, it feels a bit familiar and I can work in the system quite easily with no training needed. Now we will look into user interfaces and user experience of specifically 3D experience and in context of that. So positioning this, the value components has since a long time with TVC graphic reporting firstly built upon dashboard and widget based user interfaces. So here's an illustration of that. which shows some of the benefits, that you can have a flexible layout in this grid format, that you can rearrange things in and resize them according to your preferences and the screen size available, and also on some devices you may want to apply a more vertical positioning, for example. So since TVC graphic reporting and now with TVCs in Helium mode, we are layouting views and pages in this dashboard and widget-based UI. So here is an example of how that can look with a TVC Helium dashboard. And the good news is now that Dassault Systèmes seems to have the same idea as us. So the direction which is clearly given to us from DS is that the 3D space web application use cases and appliances will increasingly transition into being containerized within gadgets in the 3D dashboard. So this will be a gradual transition for sure over a period of time, but we at TECHNIA want to be on board and ready for this when the full transition has happened. So we are starting to move and enable our UI components for use within the 3D dashboard. So this is actually a video here where we are, you can see on the left hand side there we have the value components logo, so you just drag and drop that into the 3D dashboard tab, and then you can create widgets based on the features of the TVCs. So we have a classic table here on the left, simplified helium table here, and we can work together with all of these components building an aggregated view. So this last one is a pie chart widget there. So the trend overall then is that dashboard and widget based UIs go well together, and that since we have built our features and functionalities for being responsibly designed and for being containerized within a container, it already works quite well with the 3D dashboard as well. Some other examples on how we at TECHNIA are integrating with the 3D dashboard. So is for the search purposes. So from the global 3D experience top bar search to show the highlighting and the results in all of the value components gadgets that you may have, and also in the bottom image here when we are working with the 6W tags for finding the data that you're looking for with highlighting and with categorizing attributes into the 6W tags. So we are working actively with further integrations between the value components and the Dassault Systèmes 3D dashboard UI. Just something to highlight, that a widget-based layout is also good for performance reasons and for the user experience too. So if you have something like a list of objects on the left-hand side here, as we do, and some action that communicates with another widget, we can then preload only the necessary widgets that, for example, show more details about an object or show related objects to that one. So this will avoid the need to reload a full page or dashboard, so you will save on the network transfer time, it will render quicker, and also if you, for example, have scrolled further down the list widget here, it will not re-render so the user loses their position. So it will be a better user experience as well to keep this part of the dashboard permanently visible. So widget interactions also help in terms of a layout method in that sense. So if we now have spoken about being able to use the same TECHNIA value components within 3D space and 3D dashboard and also in a standalone UI. So one thing that is good to clarify is that there is no need to do anything extra in terms of configuration to achieve this. So on the top left here we see a 3D space page showing an object, which is a project space in this case. We have a chart widget here showing the burn down pace. on your cell phone, you would launch this in a standalone UI instead. So you would have the value components top bar and breadcrumb, and some of the containers will look different, but the widget is entirely the same. So the familiarity aspect of efficient UIs is something that we consider here as well, and of course the same applies to 3D space enabling. So the 3D space widget works and looks exactly the same as well, with the same configuration. So far we spoke about modern UIs, the importance of making things familiar and recognizable for the user so that they require less training and can work more independently from the start, and also how streamlined app UIs can help in doing that. So tailoring something for a certain user group or a certain user task to achieve that in the most efficient way. So on the theming and branding level, to theme things so that they feel familiar in terms of fonts and colors and stuff like that, that's something that we work with in the TECHNIA team on when we are using the value components embedded within 3D space or 3D dashboard. We have received some comments from some of you that things need to look more alike for the users to feel familiar and at home. So our standard theme, which is a quite neutral one, not so many colors and so on, we have worked on aligning that more to the standard theme from Dassault System. So on the right hand side here we see an out-of-the-box properties page for a part object. And if we start this video, so we see the form sections, the headers and the fields are now quite alike since our last release, where we released this new embedded theme. So having the same thematic language, I think, is another factor here in making the users feel at home. So forms is one example. Then we also have tables, which is another key component, of course, in both out-of-the-box and the value components. So the standardized theme here, we have worked with this zebra coloring, the headers being in the same look and feel and font and so on, toolbar icons, selection behavior and coloring, spacing between cells and so on. So minor things, but the main idea here is that if it looks well, if it looks coherent, then it's something that enables the users to work more efficiently. So more things on theming and branding. If you as a company have a corporate style guide, which is becoming quite common nowadays, then maybe you have defined what are your primary and secondary colors in a palette, what's the font family that is to be used, maybe even the size of that in pixels and whether it should be bold or italic in certain cases and so on. Icons that may be meaningful to you as a company, and also where elements should be placed and all of these things. So if you as an employee of this company see that the company has employed their corporate style guide to the software, then that could bring another further level of familiarity to the web app. So doing this is quite easy with having with adding only some CSS on top of the theme. So here we have various examples on how you can style and bring your own theme to TVC Helium user interfaces. So it can be quite different depending on how you choose to set this up. So really a diverse set of different looking UIs, but the same exact UI components are building up these views. So then one word about where the actual power lies. So as the IT department that provides the PLM system to your users, you can set a theme which should be the default theme, but then you can also consider to let the user have the final word in that. We enable a functionality to provide users with a theme choice, and then also whether they want to invert the color palette onto a dark mode of the theme. We can detect this from their device setting on Windows or Android or iOS, whether they generally prefer dark coloring, and then we can apply it automatically. And we can also let the users have the choice whether they want to do that. So this is a feature that you can enable if you want end users to be able to make the final decision. So far we have discussed modern UI, how to get user acceptance through familiar UIs and streamlined UIs, and another driver of user acceptance can be accessibility of the software across different device types, so that it behaves well on a mobile device, a tablet device, even when you are lacking internet connectivity and in various other scenarios. So it's not only about the responsiveness of a dashboard-based layout, it's also about considering the characteristics of the different devices. So screen size is the obvious one, but then also in terms of how do I interact with data on a touch screen versus where I have my full keyboard, whether I am permanently guaranteed to be connected, which is the case on a PC probably, but not necessarily on a cell phone, and also using the characteristics of the hardware, like perhaps a back-facing camera on your mobile phone, or the vibrating hardware of the portable device, and various other things. So we are leading up to a demo scenario that we will showcase here, where we want to use the same configuration of a Helium-based UI to achieve a work process in the manufacturing domain. So we will have a fictitious manufacturing plant here where we are, as a company, building bicycles, and we will see how a work process concerning one particular bike can flow between different roles in the organization, between different offices and locations as well, and also working on several different device types. So we will start with a field engineer here who receives a task from someone upstream that they should use their portable device in the warehouse and build some type of EBOM structure of parts that make up a proposed bicycle. Then this user will process the bike structure further via a design engineer working in the lab or the office. They will be on PC, review the design, maybe propose something in terms of changes and specifications, and then all of this can be monitored by some managerial role, some manager viewing the overall progress of this manufacturing plant and the bicycle product line. So he can have another view where he can see more of the high-level KPIs and statistics on how things are moving along. Then maybe he makes an export of this into some Excel format or something and sends it along further. So the idea here is to track multi-device user interface for working together in PLM, even if you are geographically distributed and if you are working on different device types and other types of things that differ. So if we start with the first part of the scenario then, so I'm on my mobile phone here, logging into the PLM application. I get the question now, since I'm on a fairly modern mobile phone, whether I want to install application. That's something that you can do nowadays. It's called a progressive web app. So your users will get this question. They can choose then to install it as an icon, and then it launches looking like a native app. You don't see the URL bar, and you get more screen space and color theme set and so on. You see that the user can rearrange their defined start page to their liking. I want to rearrange some of the shortcut widgets here that give me an overall understanding of my work situation. I have 7 tasks to work on, it's in one project and so on. So this is highly customizable. You noticed I got this notification there, and then I immediately swiped it to the right to dismiss it. That's something that you would expect on this type of device because it's a touchscreen. The top bar is fixed and familiar. You have this personalized thing on the right as we discussed. And regarding themes, in this installation we have chosen to let the user switch themes if they want to. That's something you can turn off or on depending on what you like. So this guy prefers a darker theme, maybe more like a night mode, and then he can easily switch to that. The menu from the left hand side slides in to save space when it's not used. That's also something that I think most users are familiar with today. And then when we do actual page navigations, widgets can be collapsed as a start if desired to save on screen space. I can swipe as well to go between the different sections of this table. I have 34 objects, but I see 10 at a time. So I can swipe back and forward between pages, so I don't need to find the next and previous buttons. Something that also makes me a bit happier as a user. I can rearrange what columns fit the screen to show me the most important columns always visible. Or if I don't like the table view at all, maybe I switch to tiles if I think the image is my best way of identifying objects here. If I want to filter on something specifically as a criteria, I can filter out only the rubber parts, for example, using the charts there. Or I can work with objects in bulk as well. So right now I want to download a few objects for offline availability. This is something that could also be useful in this manufacturing scenario if, for example, I don't trust that I will be permanently internet connected in this manufacturing plant. So I'm now using the TVC collaboration component to discuss in the context of an object. I'm writing a decision log message sort of in the discussion thread, and I'm notifying Bob Dylan, which is someone I expect to take this process further when I'm done with it, notifying that I am now about to start assembling this bicycle structure. But I have some concerns around the handlebars part of this bike, and let's see how that goes. Submit this message, and then it becomes a message in the discussion thread. So this is the root object of the bicycle that we identified, the frame itself. I can work with the characteristics of the hardware again. I can immediately use the camera of the cell phone or otherwise upload files. In this case I chose a file that was already on disk. You can use the back-facing camera here to scan for objects in the warehouse. In this case it's a windshield, so that was not really the part I was looking for. There is no windshield on my planned bike object here. Or you can do it the other way around to share a QR code with your colleague. But now let's say that we are in the warehouse and we are navigating our way through the warehouse and connecting via this QR code scanning feature all of the sub-parts of this bicycle. Pedals, the chain, the handlebars and the seat, and so on. In the background, every successfully scanned QR code connected these objects via relationships. So now we have a BOM structure of 8 parts that represent this bicycle. I can download all of them for offline accessibility, just to be on the safe side, whether I need to refer to this later on. So then, if I lose my Wi-Fi connection, in this case, you can see that the profile image is circled in red. I can no longer work with uploading features because I'm not connected. but I can still navigate around and view the objects that I just previously cached. So I can, for example, read that it's 62 centimeters wide, and I can use this as reference material now. So you can also create data while being offline, which is useful for an inspection or deviation report or something in that nature. So this field engineer has now assembled the bomb structure by scanning existing parts, but there is apparently this issue with the handlebars that he even was foreseeing. It's not wide enough, we're saying. So I can raise this issue, and it's saved locally on my device now. Let's think of this like an Outlook outbox sort of, until later on when I come back to being online. I'm raising my second issue now that there may be a concern with pricing, and then I'm done with my assessment of this bomb structure as a field engineer, and I regain connectivity. This could have been data traffic instead of Wi-Fi, of course, and it detects in this green circle that I'm back online, and then I'm also allowed to upload my pending objects. So 2 new issues were created, one notification per each. I swipe to dismiss. You can see that there are now 2 related issues to this part reported by me, and this user's name is Tom Waits, this field engineer. You can also see that in some other perspectives that I have created 8 issues in total, and get an overview of your full work in case you're working on the field for several objects. You can see that currently no user is assigned to this issue, so let's address that. I identify my dear colleague Bob Dylan to be suitable for working on this, so I assign him this issue. I trust Bob Dylan to help out with this handlebars issue. So I search and see, are there alternate handlebars in the system? Yeah, there seems to be 3 in total. So I search, find 3 results, and then this search query I can export as a URL. I can leverage the discussion functionality and paste this URL as part of the message. So Tom Waits, the current user, is sending this URL along to Bob Dylan for him to take action on this issue, and he proposes that you can use this search filter for you to find a suitable replacement handlebars part. So meanwhile, Bob Dylan, the famous design engineer, is working in his office. He's typing some minutes of meeting in his Word processor here, and he receives this notification that Tom Waits has sent you a message. Open the web browser and the collaboration inbox, and in this discussions thread that you have previously discussed with Tom, you will see that he has now sent a URL with a search filter. You'll see these 3 handlebars and the message from him that he asks you to find the best replacement because the handlebars needs to be wider. So you can see these search results in various ways, but we decide that we want to see the full list of parts available to us. We go to the list table widget and listing the parts and filtering them locally here. So the same 3 objects could be found in this way as well. So here from the table column we can also notice that there are 2 issues with this one. Exactly what we discussed in the message, that it needs to be wider. Also Tom raises some concerns on pricing. So this is a way to see contextual info in this side panel there. We can compare these 3 handlebars and try to understand what would be the best one. So in this case we see that this middle one is specified as being wider. You can see some other comparisons with weight and cost and whatnot. And also from the image we can tell that it has a support bar in the middle there, so it's sturdier as well. So a wider, sturdier handlebars, that sounds like what we're looking for. we can close these overlays that we used for comparison. And as a design engineer now, I want to make sure additionally that this potential change of handlebars will conform to the design specification. So we can use the drawing print that was connected to the bike and see any attachments specifying the blueprints here. Okay, so this is how it looks in an angled profile, and we will see side drawing as well. Okay, so it should be somewhat sturdy. We can see it had curved endings there as well. So on the root object of the bicycle, the frame part, we can now see the full structure of subcomponents, and we want to disconnect this current handlebars and replace it with the sturdier one. So we navigate to a flattened list of the parts consisting of the bicycle. We can remove this connection, get notification that this succeeded, and then we will use this quick connect search form to find the name of the part that we wanted to replace it with. Once this is done, we can go back to the structure view of the bicycle bomb structure, and we'll see now that the new handlebars is connected instead, the one with sturdier support and the wider model. And from there on, we can go back to the original issue that was assigned to us by Tom Waits. We can assign him to that issue, while we also unassign ourselves, so indicating the design engineer work has been done and it's back to the reporter to process it further. So that was a little bit about a role-based simplified UI for a design engineer that could have a look at the specification documents and drawings, could make judgment calls comparing alternative components in a structure, in this case choosing the best handlebars out of the three based on some criteria, and disconnecting and connecting in the new one. So in the next sequence here we'll see things from a more managerial view, so a bit less hands-on and a bit more around KPIs, numbers, charts, statistics and trends. So we will see that in the next part here. So for a manager role, it may be of more use to keep an eye on these high-level metrics and progress. So we are a third guy here. We are Bruce Springsteen, which we have given a manager role in this example. And on his start page, maybe what he's looking to find out is the overall most important things to do. So we're looking at parts here and sorting by those that have related issues. And of those issues, we may filter and prioritize by the severity of them, for example. So this part needs thicker glass. Seems to be a pretty important issue. So using this type of perspective, a manager might use a role-tailored UI to just keep track of things. So when watching the project space for this bicycle building manufacturing project, the manager may be interested in an overview and seeing what tasks are ongoing in the project, how they're doing and who is working on them. Maybe also the pace of which the tasks are getting completed in a Scrum-like burn-down chart, a list of the members in the project by their role, and also some charts that give a visual indication of the data distribution. We can also use the drill down feature of a dashboard to, for example, find which tasks are Leonard working on that are currently ongoing in this example. And then we can go back up to the first dashboard perspective. For financially responsible managers, it may be more useful to have some number-based and chart-based dashboards such as this, where you can track budget and benefit, where you could get some relative distribution of those, and also sort on, for example, product lines Here we have the messenger bikes, mountain bikes and city bikes, and tracking the targeted retail cost over time here. And this may be especially interesting when we make changes. So for example, when we chose the other handlebars just recently, and if the replacement part was more expensive, it would have been interesting for us to see and track these changes over time. And this type of view is something a manager can easily set up partially for themselves in a dashboard such as this by choosing the widgets that are available to him. And we think this is a way to get more roles into the PLM platform as a whole, not necessarily only people who are working with their mobiles and on the field, but also managers who need easy perspective on the overall progress. In this end-to-end use case that we had a look at, we produced data from the left-hand side on the field engineer level with a cell phone, and then later on in that workflow, the design engineer and the manager consumed that data. Data could also flow in the other direction, of course, and maybe that is actually more common, that data produced on the PC user interface is later on consumed, in this case by a sales representative on the field there, who's getting some instructions on what they should keep an eye out for in terms of purchasing new products for the retailer company. So data can flow in both directions using these streamlined user interfaces across devices. And as another example, it could sometimes be about the overall working progress as well. So if you are assigned to some task in the system and then you leave for 3 weeks of vacation and then you realize I forgot to reassign my tasks. So that's something that previously would have been hard to do if you left your PC behind, but luckily there's a simple UI where you can do these things from your cell phone, allowing the process to continue in your absence. So sometimes it's about the streamlined UIs being easy to pick up to do these quick type of tasks as well, maybe reviewing something, approving something, delegating something. So the startup time of these streamlined app-like UIs is also significantly smaller, which make them suitable for quicker type of tasks like these. As for the user interfaces and user experiences going forward, we at TECHNIA presented in October last year on the PLM Innovation Forum event that we believe our value components future in this area regards giving more power to an end user by allowing them to set up their own views, dashboards and widgets to represent the data that they work with and the data that is available to them. So we have started this work, and in the previous release from the value components team, we have enabled the feature for a user to create their own dashboards and save a variant of existing widgets. Of course, that's just the first step, and we look forward to enabling the end users to have even more control over their UIs so that they can customize things to their liking and build useful views for their own needs. So we really believe that after all of the UI improvements, the final layer of improvement has to come from the user themselves that know how they want to perform their tasks. So if anything has struck your interest during this presentation in terms of how you can streamline UIs, how you can apply a more modern and app-based look and feel for some use cases or roles that is working today or should work in your PLM platform, please reach out to your TECHNIA contact person, and we will be happy to work with you and define some use cases that could be suitable, and also show some relevant material for inspiring your UIs. So that was all from my side, I want to thank you for your time, and now if there are any questions, let's see if we can answer them. Thank you so much.